Sick of getting blisters? Stop slipping and just be comfortable with Pure Grip Socks Pro. Great fit, great comfort, lots of grip, and an even better price. Available now at puregripsocks.com.
If you're on the market for a pair of laceless football boots, you've probably exclusively looked at options from Adidas. And while they absolutely make some really good stuff right now, there's an argument to be made that in 2024, the best laceless football boot is made by New Balance. Ladies and gentlemen, say hello to the New Balance Tekela V4 Plus Pro, which, as the name suggests, is a refresh of the original Tekela V4, of course maintaining the laceless design, but updating the upper as well as the laceless system in what I would argue are subtle but meaningful ways. And when you're talking about the alternatives, a top-end laceless football boot from Adidas retails for $270, where these retail for $215. With that said, being less expensive isn't all that meaningful if the product isn't quite as good. Luckily, that is not a concern with the Tekela V4 Plus Pro, and I'd go as far as to say that not only do I think it's arguably the best laceless boot on the market right now, it's also one of the best laceless football boots I've ever worn. We're going to talk about why I think that's the case as we go over all the details of this new laceless model from New Balance, including how they fit and feel on feet, ultimately concluding whether or not this is the laceless football boot that you should have on your radar rather than something from the three stripes. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, watch the review, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick these up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes via the link down below. And as always, if you guys enjoy these brutally honest reviews, don't forget to drop a like on the video and make sure you're subscribed to the channel if you haven't already so you don't miss out on my reviews of all the latest football boots of 2024. So first things first, V4 versus V4 Plus, old versus new. They're obviously very similar looking boots. The design itself hasn't changed drastically. The sole plate and stud pattern is a direct carryover as well, and they both feature hypo knit for the main body of the upper. However, that hypo knit has been reworked in such a way where not only does it feel softer and more pliable, but if you really want that quote-unquote sock boot experience, I think this is the most sock-like pair of football boots I've ever worn. And that's not just because of the white and black colorway, that legitimately just looks like a pair of socks. For those of you that saw my review of the V4 Plus Pro Low, basically the low-cut laced variation of this boot, the upper on the laceless model is more or less exactly the same. The hypo knit material compared to the previous generation has been thinned out quite a bit through the forefoot and toe box area, really giving you that kind of open mesh look as far as the texturing on the surface is concerned. It's a little bit rough to the touch, and then you have these kind of longer lines in the form of raised texturing on both the lateral and medial side, all of which really don't do all that much in the way of additional grip on the ball. They're there mostly for cosmetics. However, the softness of this upper consistently across the entire foot is what's really, really impressive. And for those that loved the idea of mid-cut knitted football boots when the concept was first introduced back in 2014 by Nike, the Magista Obra 1 kind of being the first to really give you that sock-like sensation. This is a full return to that concept, done in a way that is arguably better than any other knitted football boot that came before it. And maybe that's a bit of an extreme take, but truly and honestly, if you're looking for an upper that has that sock-like feel, genuinely just like playing in your socks, this is pretty much as close to that feeling as you can achieve in a pair of football boots. A feeling that is only amplified by the laceless design of this football boot, where you can see across the top of the foot, kind of pushed slightly to the medial side, you're going to find some elasticated knit material that's been reworked compared to the original Tekela to basically give you more tension. And that's all this effectively does as far as being different, is that it's just a little bit tighter, it stretches less easily than the previous model, and the collar itself, similar to the previous one, is very, very pinched, so it wraps your ankle much closer than a lot of mid-cut collars will these days, while still allowing you to stretch it open enough to get your foot in and out of the football boot. Where admittedly for a mid-cut boot, this is one of the more difficult ones to get on because of how small the collar itself actually is, but it's definitely not impossible. And after a couple tries, especially after you wear them a little bit and the collar does stretch slightly, it does get easier. With that in mind, the struggle in getting these on really pays off in the added tension that you have from this laceless system in general. It hugs your foot really securely, and while there is still going to be that stretch upon more intense movements, it's inevitable with a laceless design because you don't have anything locking in the tension. They still feel very, very secure, and again, give you that sensation of freedom like you're playing in your socks. Moving to the rear, you're going to find an internal plastic heel counter, nice and solid back here, and you can see that it does curve in slightly. This has a little bit of that sensation of, again, early knitted mid-cut football boots, where pretty much all mid-cut boots are low-cut ones with an extension in the form of this elasticated knit material, but it does kind of cut in where you can really feel where the structured heel area starts and stops, and then of course it transitions into this very flexible non-ankle support providing collar for those that are wondering. The heel liner itself is really smooth to the touch if you run your finger this way, but when you run your finger this way, it has that little bit of kind of like the rough side of Velcro texture, similar to what we used to see in the lower part of the heel liner on an Adidas Predator Instinct. This is going back 10 years now. It was also something that was featured on the original Tekela V4. It carries over into this one, and it just gives you that little bit of extra lockdown in terms of the heel liner grabbing your socks in a gentle way to prevent your heel from slipping, something that is particularly important when you're talking about a laceless football boot. The padding through the heel liner, while it's difficult for me to show you, is pretty significant. There's lots of it back there, and for the most part, I would say the heel is quite comfortable, although it does grab tightly. So during the break-in process, it's really important, like with any football boot, but especially the laceless one, you get used to it, wear them in slowly, because you could potentially get blisters just based on how tightly it grabs you. You kind of need to give your heel a little bit of time to adjust to that, but once broken in, I thought the comfort was fantastic. And then the insole, fully removable. I'll give you guys a quick look at that. It features a mesh liner on top, and it is made from their fuel cell foam, but admittedly, while it does look quite premium, it feels like pretty regular foam. Maybe a smidge thicker than what you're going to find from most football boot insoles, but overall, in terms of the feel underfoot, there's nothing about it that I thought stood out. When it comes to the sole plate and stud pattern, the Tekela range features one of the most unique layouts currently available in the football boot industry. The plastic sole plate itself is on the flexible side, and I think works really well with the natural, pliable, sock-like feel that you get from the upper. You really wouldn't want a super stiff sole plate given the design of the upper, so I think all of that works really well, but the stud pattern is what's particularly unique, in that you can see all of these kind of orangey red studs are positioned in fairly traditional ways, 3 on the side of the forefoot, on the left as well as the right, 1 support stud in the middle. Then you have kind of more of a square, but basically conical stud layout, 4 in total underneath the heel. But you'll notice along the edges, you have these little kind of shark teeth that are about half the length of the normal studs, and they run right to the edge of the sole plate, which I think is a pretty neat idea in the sense that when you really think about pushing off in different directions, it's very rare that you're always pushing off perfectly square. Your feet are going to be tilted, and when you tilt into the ground, these little shark tooth blades are going to dig in and can potentially be that little bit of a difference in you slipping or maintaining traction and winning the ball. I'm not a big fan of the whole boots by position concept, but I really do feel for somebody like a goalkeeper in particular, when you're always diving on the edges of your feet, having those extra studs along the side, especially in a laceless format where they're never going to come untied on you, I think this would be kind of an ideal pair of football boots for a goalkeeper. But of course, that's not to say that somebody else in a different position couldn't wear them, because at the end of the day, the boots have no idea what position you're playing in them. Overall though, it's a really cool stud pattern in the sense that it is more traditional in terms of the traction provided by these main conical studs, but having that little bit of extra grip along the edges just, I think, makes this stand out from the crowd as far as FG stud patterns go. While the marketing might suggest otherwise, when it comes to weight, what if I told you that the Tekela was lighter than the current Superfly 9 Elite? Let's see if that's actually the case, both in the same size 9.5 US We'll start off with the Mercurials, and you can see that they weigh in at 7 ounces exactly, the equivalent of 198 grams, which is obviously very lightweight. Change the scale back 2 ounces, and we'll throw on the Tekela, and you can see that they weigh in at 6.9 ounces, the equivalent of 195 grams. Of course, we're talking about a 3-gram difference, which is effectively nothing. Nobody's going to be able to notice that. If you're buying a pair of Mercurials because you like the fact that they're light, just know that the New Balance Tekela V4 Plus is actually, or technically, a little bit lighter. In other words, you don't have to buy a speed boot to get something super light. On feet, if I had one word to describe the feel of the Tekela V4 Plus Pro, it would be futuristic, because it really does highlight how special a laceless football boot should feel, where I think so many laceless boots that have come out over the years have kind of just been laceless for the sake of being laceless. This is a design that genuinely feels like effort was put in, and they've considered all the factors in terms of the boot fitting perfectly and having the proper amount of lockdown with the elasticated knit that they have across the top of the foot, as well as the tighter fitting collar. I think that in itself also plays into this really feeling like it's flowing up your leg rather than something that's being strapped to your feet, which I really like. The only gripe that I have in regards to the feel of this boot is in the heel area, where similar to the 2014 mid-cut Flyknit boots from Nike, you do feel, like I mentioned earlier, that little bit of pressure kind of towards the upper part of the structured heel area. It's not necessarily an issue with discomfort that will never go away, but it is something to be aware of during the break-in process, in that you just have to take things slow, otherwise you could potentially get some blisters. Other than that, the feel of this upper is super soft and pliable. It really does have that sensation of playing in your socks. From a width perspective, because they are New Balance, you have the option of regular as well as wide fit. I'm currently wearing the regular width variation, which I think is going to be suitable for most people, but of course with laceless boots, you don't have that ability to adjust them. So if you genuinely have wide feet and you just really want a pair of laceless football boots, the fact that you do have that wide fit option is pretty cool and something that you will not find from the Adidas brand. And then as far as sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is perfect. So if you are looking to get a pair for yourself, I would strongly recommend going true to size in order to achieve the best possible fit. So in conclusion, it's no secret that I think the Tekela V4 Plus Pro is a really, really good football boot. And when you are comparing it to its main competition in predominantly the X Crazy Fast Elite Laceless as well as the Predator 24 Elite Laceless, they're both excellent football boots, but I really do think if I wanted an X or a Predator, I would opt for one of the versions with laces, just because I think it's the better fitting and performing alternative, not to mention the less expensive one as well. And when you're talking about a laceless football boot in general, especially in the day and age of knitted upper football boots, I think having that sock-like sensation paired up with a laceless system is really the way to go, and what makes the laceless concept feel like it's adding to the experience rather than just being a feature that exists to exist. I've said it before and I'll say it again. There really is no performance advantage to making a football boot laceless, which means if it's not going to enhance performance, it has to enhance the experience. And this is genuinely one of those football boots where if you like the laceless football boot concept, this is about as good as an experience you can hope to have.